X-T2 is the latest flagship from Fuji, in price and features very similar to X Pro 2. 24 megapixel sensor, advanced autofocus paired with very fast continuous shooting up to 14 frames per second, high resolution LCD and EVF, 4K video recording, dual SD card slots and many more, which I will talk about during this review. If you wonder what's the difference between this camera and similarly priced X Pro 2, here's a quick list. Basically, X Pro 2 is made for photographers who enjoy prime lenses, rangefinder style placement of hybrid optical and electronic viewfinder, and generally shoot more stationary scenes. While X-T2 emphasizes sport photography, usage with heavier and bigger lenses, and video recording. First thing I did in a matter of minutes is to remove the neck strap. You see, it is positioned on such a place it really gets in the way when holding the camera. It is either below the index finger or between index and middle finger and feels really awkward, at least for me. Once removed and replaced with this tiny hand strap, camera felt way more natural. Using X-T2 is actually a pure joy. What I liked best is controls layout, especially rotating dials for exposure triangle. All Fuji lenses have dedicated aperture dial, on the left side of the camera there is ISO dial and on the right side shutter dial. When used in auto or semi-auto modes, there is exposure compensation dial at the far right. And that's all I need for most of my photography. Various buttons can be customized to make the camera even more usable with direct controls. Since there is no traditional mode dial, in order to set the camera to auto mode, you need to set all three dials to position marked with the red letter A. I'm not sure how many owners of this camera will use it that way, but if needed, it's possible. There are direct switches for drive mode and light metering, and these are one of the few things I didn't like about this camera. They are recessed and it is hard to get a grip on them, so when I finally move them, they often jump two places instead of one. Something similar can be said for exposure compensation dial. It is hard to grip and rotate it with just one finger. For example, my thumb, what would be logical. Even with two fingers, it requires good grip to be used. Luckily, if you put it to position marked with letter C, exposure compensation is controlled with the front dial, which is easy to reach and rotate. Also, it extends exposure compensation to plus or minus 5. There's one more detail I'd like to show you. In order to protect accidental exposure compensation change, front dial must be pressed to activate it, what is nice. But once you do press it and start adjusting exposure compensation, Fuji remembers that. So even if you turn the camera off, once back on, there will be no more need to press front dial to activate exposure compensation. Fuji paid real attention to such small details. I don't know how many people even notice that. Shutter dial has full stop values, so in order to get 1/3 steps or shutter time longer than 1 second, position marked with letter T is needed. ISO and shutter dial can be locked with mechanical switch in the center, just like Olympus Pen F. Multi-control dials can be clicked and therefore used to control various settings as well as fully navigate many system without the need to press OK button on the back of the camera. Autofocus joystick is the new addition compared to X-T1. This is my and probably everyone else's favorite way of selecting autofocus points. With the optional better grip, X-T2 becomes really big and heavy camera, but that makes sense if used with heavy lenses like 100 to 400 mm. Grip is weather sealed like the body, has identical high build quality and duplicates all controls including joystick. It also has this boost button which, when enabled, decreases focus time, increases EVF refresh rate, shortens interval between shots, shutter lag, viewfinder blackout, and finally increases burst rate from 8 to 11 frames per second using mechanical shutter and even 14 frames per second for electronic. On the left side there are connectors for monitoring headphones and connector for charging batteries directly in grip. Grip can hold 2 batteries, so with the one in the camera that makes 3 altogether and extends battery life to around 1000 shots. 24 megapixel X-Tron sensor definitely delivers high quality results. Colors tend to be realistic by default at out-of-the-box settings. Typical for Fuji, white balance is spot on neutral, and blue skies have a bit more cyan than magenta hues. There are plenty of fine details in images. As always, RAW is required for maximum quality since JPEG's noise reduction can destroy fine details, especially at high ISO. Still, I think even JPEG will be very interesting to a lot of users, and especially those who just want a nice camera with high quality photos without much fuss. X-T2 has usual so-called art filters, but they are way too aggressive for my taste. You can see some of them right now. They are buried deep inside main menu, like Fuji themselves didn't want you to use them. Almost like they were forced upon engineers building the camera by marketing guys. Instead, they gave us direct control over fill simulation filters, which are very subtle and look really nice and classy. Dynamic range is fine. A good deal of post-processing can be made on raw files. Here's a comparison with my Canon 6D. Both shots were underexposed and then lifted by 5 stops. Crop sensor in Fuji is clearly better than full frame in 5-year-old Canon. Still, even better dynamic range can be found in Nikon D7200 and some Sony cameras. High ISO is awesome for a crop camera. I found X-T2 could be used all the way up to ISO 12800 when needed. Noise is visible but has a very uniform, grain-like pattern. Everyone has different criteria, but for me, Fuji is very close to some full-frame cameras in certain cases. No wonder they decided not to produce a full-frame camera, but go directly to medium format. Now it's time to say a few words about video recording. Fuji is traditionally still image company, and I never used a Fuji camera that had really good video. Until now. Here are some samples, and I can say they look spectacular. They are very detailed, actually comparable to the best on the market, and have the same realistic color rendering like in still images. I haven't noticed moire effect or compression artifacts. I have uploaded these samples in a separate video here on YouTube, so take a look at them in native 4K resolution. Link to that video is in description. Now let's take a look at high ISO. Once again I am surprised since even ISO 12800 looks quite good. Noise is well controlled and there is no color cast in shadows. Compare that with Panasonic GH5 at ISO 12800 and you don't need me to tell you which looks better. As features go, X-T2 has essential stuff, but a lot is still missing to make it a proper video camera. Maximum resolution is 4K at 30p and Full HD at 60p. There is no slow motion. 4K can be recorded internally or be set to output over HDMI. Sound recording can be adjusted in 20 levels. There is speaking, but no zebra, no histogram while recording, and no focus magnification when recording. When using 4K, a small crop is applied, but it is not very significant. 1.17 compared to still image and 1.72 times compared to full frame. 4K can be recorded up to 10 minutes, but when the vertical grip with 2 extra batteries is attached, that extends to 30 minutes. There is an F-log for grading, but it is only available via HDMI output on external recorder. Video has its own drive position and is activated using shutter button. That means you cannot be in a photo mode and quickly start recording video if needed. Autofocus also leaves a lot to be desired compared to the best like Sony Alpha 6500 or Canon 80D. It has good speed with some lenses like 10 to 24mm, but is nervous and jumps around when changing autofocus points. Still, video quality is very good and I'm glad someone in Fuji finally realized video is what sells today. Spot metering is linked with active focus point, but you can disable that in the menu system if you do not want it. Thumbs up for giving us an option. Autofocus has 325 focus points, 169 of which are phase detect, and as is usual for high-end mirrorless cameras, various options to group them or select autofocus point size. Phase detection is available and you can even select left or right eye for the camera to focus on. Focusing speed greatly depends on the lens used. During my review, focus was near instant with 10 to 24 f4 lens, but when used with the 35mm f1.4, completely different story. Worst case scenario is several seconds of focusing, what is unacceptable for modern cameras. Manual focus is well implemented. By pressing rear dial, magnification is activated no matter if in auto or manual focus. Magnification can cover entire LCD or just center part of it, and there is focus scale at the bottom. But best of everything, pay attention to focus scale. White line indicates where focus exactly is, and the blue bar shows what will be in focus depending on selected aperture. This stuff is really great for manual zone focusing. 3 inches LCD screen has 1 million dots and perfect viewing angles. I don't know why I am telling you that anymore, pretty much all modern LCD screens are really good. But that's not all. Fuji has a trick up its sleeve. LCD is tiltable up and down, this is nothing new. But what are we supposed to do when taking portrait-oriented images from low or high angles? That's why this screen has an extra hinge that makes possible to articulate it sideways. Nice idea. Electronic viewfinder uses OLED technology and has 2.3 million dots. It is really one of the best finders. Refresh rate can be set at 60 or 100 frames per second. Still, in my opinion, Panasonic GH5 has an even better one, with more resolution and better dynamic range. Here is how the shutter sounds on single release and burst modes. There is also an option to select electronic shutter, so the camera becomes fully silent. According to official specifications, this camera should be able to work in temperatures ranging from -10 to +40 Celsius. Here's my experience with that.
Okay, I have a problem with the brand new Fuji X-T2 which I got for a review. The camera simply stopped working. It is a bit cold outside, it is -8 or 9 degrees Celsius. But this camera should be able to handle it. It also has a grip with 2 batteries inside. That's 3 batteries altogether. It worked for maybe half an hour, then it simply powered off and I can't get it to work. At the same time, my Canon 6D keeps working without a problem.
I am not completely sure whether this particular X-T2 has any problems or all of them stop working in cold weather. All batteries have issues in low temperatures, but this is actually my first time ever that the camera stopped working altogether because of that. Let me know in the comments about your experience with X-T2 battery. When it's not this cold though, battery lasts for around 340 shots on a single charge. This is fairly typical for mirrorless cameras. Standard external charger is part of the package. What some users will greatly appreciate is the ability to charge the battery inside the camera using micro USB cable. You cannot use the camera while charging. Interestingly, only the battery inside the camera can be charged. Those in the battery grip cannot be charged that way. I tried. Still, grip is delivered with a 9V DC adapter, which is used for charging these 2 batteries. Connectors are on the left side. X-T2 has 3.5mm microphone input, USB 3.0, micro HDMI and 2.5mm connector for wired remote control. Memory card slot is on the other side and has double slots for 2 memory cards. Main menu brings nothing new. It is fairly easy to navigate using twin dials, joystick or a multi-way controller. Still, some options like how to select different memory card are a bit buried in submenus. It took some time for me to learn what is where. Auto ISO has 3 presets. For each of them it is possible to set lower and upper ISO value and shutter speed when ISO will be changed. So to round things up, X-T2 is one impressive camera. Image quality is really good. Camera is fast and responsive and completely packed with advanced features. Most of everything, I enjoyed classic Fuji style interface with manual dials on the camera. No one except Fuji implemented them this good. I was also surprised by 4K video quality. If someone showed them to me and said it was Fuji, I wouldn't believe. There's a good deal of features still missing for video recording, but even now, from the first serious try, X-T2 could be used for video work without much problems. Some detail need to be polished out though. Autofocus speed is not consistent with all the lenses and gives maximum performance with only a small set of them, and battery life could be an issue in low temperatures. That's all for this review. If you have a question, feel free to ask me in the comment section below. Subscribe to my channel for updates, and if you want to support my work, buy stuff on Amazon using my affiliate links below the video. You will not pay any more than otherwise, but I will get a small percentage from every purchase. Thanks for watching.